it's recorded on the computer, I guess. All right, there we go. It is recording now. Oh, what am I doing here? I'm adding a poll by mistake. All right, let me share my screen. All right, you guys can see my screen? Yes?
Yeah.
Okay. So like I said, I'll share this document with you guys. I just wanted to, so when I have everyone on here, so everyone knows, just to look for it on Moodle. It will be posted kind of like at the top of our Moodle page, where like the syllabus and stuff is. But basically dates, right? Remember, we're starting next week, topic, and then lab session times, right? Lab session A, lab session B. And then in terms of the breakdown of who's where, right? So basically I took Tuesday lab, I broke it down in half based on alphabetical order of last name or whatever my roster says. And that's how it breaks down here, okay? So like I said, I'll post this so you guys know. This Thursday lab session C, I put that in because there's a couple students who have a class conflict, okay? Now, with that said, now you have to come to your designated time, right? Because of social distancing, I can't have more than 8, I think it's 9 total in the lab at once, or 8 total at once, okay? So you have to stick to this schedule. Now, with that said, this is why I'm kind of giving you something to think about. If you would like, as long as it doesn't end up to be too many people, if somebody wants to switch into this later kind of the in-person, if you're coming in person, if you're virtual, whatever, but if you're coming in person for labs, and for some reason this 5:15 p.m. on Thursdays maybe works better for you for some reason, email me separately and I'll let you know if that's possible, okay? If there are too many people, then I'm gonna have to stop it. But I figured since I have a little bit of space here, I'll give you guys a little extra flexibility if necessary, okay? So real quick too, these are the 3 students that have the class conflict. Nobody else does, right? Okay, all right. So like I said, if for some reason, think about that, email me separately. Don't say anything now. I will post this so everyone can take a quicker, a closer look at it. And I'll probably talk about it a little bit more in lab. All right. Now, let me just go to Moodle.
Wait, I just have a quick question.
Sure, go ahead. Wait.
1 second. Professor, I have a quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I wanted to switch because I'm supposed to be. You have me on in person, but unfortunately I can't really make it to
everyone
due to because I had to take the train. So I switched to online.
Everyone, Katya, everyone is on that list, whether you're saying you're going in person or not, because, and again, I'll explain that in lab. If you're not attending the labs in person, you still have to log in virtually at that designated time, okay? So everyone, whether you're in person or virtual, is on that list there, all right?
Now, I have a question, Professor.
Okay. Yeah.
I just got back. I don't know if you answered this. Are we allowed to switch, say somebody like stays online for one of those like time slots? Could we switch to that time, like for in person?
No, like that's what I mean. If for some reason you're like thinking you want to switch, you have to tell me now and I'll let you know if it's possible. And then that's it. We have to stick to it because I can't have people coming in and out and then there's 9 in there and then that creates issues, right? Okay. And it's more mainly, Brad, if you really want to switch into that later one, that session C later on Thursday, I'm okay with that. But the other ones really don't have space. But like I said, if there's an issue, email me, but really everyone should be attending during their designated lab time, okay? But whatever you would say now, you have to stick with for the whole semester, okay?
Okay, that's fine. I was just asking.
Yep, yeah, that's fine. Like I said, email me if something like that, short of something changed with your schedule or whatever. If there's room, that's fine, but we just have to stick with it. Okay. So like I said, we can talk more about that too in lab because then I have less of you guys. So I'll pull that back up at the beginning of our little virtual lab session today, okay? All right, any other kind of like housekeeping type of questions or issues or anything like that?
Where is lab gonna be in person?
It's on that lab schedule listed. It's H Henderson Hall 113 is the lab.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, you got it. Any other questions, guys? All right. Oh, other reminder, we're in person for lecture on Thursday. Those of you that are choosing me in person, we'll see how this goes, okay? If it doesn't go well, then I'm gonna switch it back to all virtual, because if it's a hot mess, it's just not worth it, right? So let's see what happens. Hopefully it'll end up being all right. It may be fine. Okay, so those of you who are planning or choosing to be in person for lecture, Thursday at 12:30, okay? And it's in, and I believe I put that in the email. The room is on our schedule. I think it's Mahoney Library, lower level or something like that. I've never been in there, so we'll see how that is. All right, guys? All right, so let's take a look here. So we're through chapters 1 and 2. Again, the recorded lectures are here. I explained everything in those lectures. It's just like if I was going to lecture on Zoom, right? It's there. You can pause it. You can listen to 10 minutes, pause it again, and listen to another 10 minutes, okay? Everything is there. If you have not been listening to those recorded lectures, you aren't going to pass the class. I'll just put it out there. You won't, okay? So make sure you're doing that. That's your responsibility. And then ask me questions. I'm more than happy to go over things 20 times. I don't care, as long as I know everyone's doing their part. Okay, guys? So as I said, the assignments, I did that. If I sent you a message about something about the assignment, just respond to me via email separately, and we can go from there. I'll go over the metric system again if there's questions with that during lab today at 2. Okay. All right. So like I said, we're in chapter 3, right? We're covering chapter 3 this week. There are 2 parts to the recorded lecture. This chapter is a little more dense, right? Like now we start getting into, you know, a little bit more in-depth sort of information, okay? This here, I just wanted to point this out too. I think I did this another time, but somebody had just asked me about this. These review packets here are just for it's just an extra resource for you, okay? It's PDFs of the chapter summaries in the book and extra review questions, okay? So if you feel like you need a little extra practice, you can do those. You can ask Katie to go over those at the group tutoring sessions, okay? That might be an extra, something good to go over there, or you can do it on your own. If you're not sure of the answers, they're in the back of the book, but if you need them, please let me know, okay? That's an extra resource. Remember, anytime you see one of these, this is an assignment, right? Okay, so the one thing, this was the assignment that everyone thought was due today, or not everyone, but some people, because the due date said today, but it's not. Now, this is for chapters 1 through 4. We haven't even covered chapter 3 or 4 yet, right? So I wouldn't ask you to do an assignment on something we didn't cover yet. So remember, that's due next Thursday, okay, guys? And then you're gonna have another homework assignment. We also have another quiz before the exam as well, right? So just kind of a heads up. All right. I believe, yeah, we already went over the chapter 1-2 assignment, right? So again, we're all caught up. I'm all caught up with grading. That usually doesn't happen, but we'll see how long that lasts. But so anyway, right now we are. Chapter 3 homework assignment is due on Thursday, guys, okay? So again, make sure you listen to the lecture. So let me just pull up chapter 3 just to introduce it a little bit. Again, any questions right now, guys? I guess kind of, or even before we move on to chapter 3, are there any questions that like the quiz sort of prompted in terms of going over some material from chapters 1 and 2? No? Okay. All right. All right, so let's take a look at chapter 3 here.
Professor, I just have a quick question.
Sure.
When we upload the pictures, because I handwrite all my notes, but I write very big, so there's like probably have like a good like 8 pages of notes.
Should be, I think it's set to accept 20 files, so it should be okay.
Okay, all right. I just want to make sure you don't.
1 is okay.
For that exam, you're talking about for like that picture of the exam 1 review sheet, that assignment?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's okay. For that assignment, I don't really care. You can submit like 10 files or whatever, because I just want to go, for that, I want to give you guys the freedom of doing it the way you want, okay? If for some reason, and I think there's, I did change the settings so that it should accept JPEG files and everything like that for that assignment, all right? Any other questions, guys? No? Okay. So if we take a look at chapter 3, right? Let me move this over here. So the chemistry of organic molecules, right? So this is, like I said, you know, kind of starts getting into really the sort of meat of the course. The first slide usually is, it just pertains to the little introduction that the book always gives an introduction, kind of like to like entertain the sort of why does anyone care kind of question, right? Like who cares about chemistry of organic molecules, right? So it usually tries to pull in some kind of example or relate the topic to something in real life, okay? So that's where this is kind of coming from, okay? This talks about trans fats. And basically we as humans have sort of created these trans fats by, like, if you ever heard of like hydrogenated oils, right? We basically can add hydrogens to these unsaturated fats. We call that hydrogenation, and that basically increases the shelf life of food. It might change the flavor or the texture. However, it causes these trans fats to form. And there's been like some research out there that has showed that these trans fats are actually worse for you than saturated fats. Okay, so that's why you always see on packaging where it'll say like no hydrogenated oils or no trans fats, right? Because a lot of these trans fats were linked to cardiovascular issues and diseases, okay? So again, that's kind of all the chapters, or most of them start this way with a little kind of introduction. And then we'll talk more about this as you go through the chapter, okay? So again, you know, I'm not gonna go through everything. Make sure you listen to the recorded lecture, but just an outline here, right? I talk about organic molecules, and then in terms of like 4 types of biomolecules. And I was gonna say, what are they? They're listed there, right? So these are the 4 classes of organic molecules or biomolecules, okay? So carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. And so the chapter is broken down by talking about each one of those classes in detail, right? Including the reactions that happen in order to form them and to break them down. So again, let's try to let me ask you guys some questions, or try to kind of put some stuff into perspective, right? So one thing, so why do you think we talk about organic molecules in biology? Who wants to kind of answer? Who cares? Why should you guys care?
Because it's what we're made out of.
Yeah, right. These organic molecules are what make up living things, right? And so we have to talk about organic molecules in biology. And as a biology major, that's why you're required to take 2 semesters of organic chemistry, right? So we're not getting into like extensive organic chemistry and going through all these different reactions or anything like that. You save that, you have a whole year of that, right? But we have to introduce ourselves to these organic molecules, right? And know a little bit of basics about them. Hold on 1 second. I gotta let my dog in. I feel like he always barks during you guys' class. Okay. All right. So while I have this up here, so how about somebody gives me an example, not Brad, because he just answered, an example of a carbohydrate.
Pasta.
Glucose.
Okay. So think about a molecule, though, not necessarily like a food, but you're right. When we think about pasta, bread, those are carbohydrates, but what particularly in them would we consider? Say that again, Kiara?
Lactose.
Good.
Sugar.
Lactose. Go ahead. What's another one?
Isn't
Sugar.
glucose one?
Glucose.
Yeah, glucose, lactose. Those are all types of sugars, right? Somebody said sugar. Good. What about a more complex type of carbohydrate? Think about potatoes.
Starches.
Sodium.
Starch,
Yeah.
not sodium, right? Remember, sodium is just an element, right? Remember, organic molecules, right, contain carbon and hydrogen atoms. So all of what we're talking about, all of these types of molecules contain carbon and hydrogen, also oxygen usually too. What else? What's another? Does anyone know the name of the carbohydrate that animals use to store glucose? Begins with a G.
Glycogen.
Glycogen. Good. Good. All right. Starch is the carbohydrate, the storage carbohydrate for plants, right? So plants store glucose in the form of starch. And again, you know, we can talk more about that. All right, good. So what about some examples of lipids?
Fats.
Yep, fats, good. What else?
Is oil one?
Oils.
Yeah,
Oils.
Good. What else?
Oil, right? Yeah.
Yep, oils, fats.
Yes.
What about, I give an example, and maybe you didn't listen to the recorded lecture just yet, but there's a particular type of hormones that are lipids. Anyone know?
What vitamins be one?
Hormones, a specific type of hormone that's a lipid.
Steroid.
Yes, steroid hormones. So testosterone, estrogen. Good. All right. Cool. All right. What about proteins? So I'm not going to ask you about an example of proteins, but what about a function of a protein? Or when you think about proteins, how would you sort of describe their function, I guess, in the cell?
They have
Provides nutrient.
Well,
so.
sort of indirectly, because they can act as enzymes, right? That would be involved in like metabolic, like chemical reactions and stuff. Brad, were you going to say something?
Yeah, each protein is kind of made with a specific job in mind, so they're only going to really do one type of thing.
Yep,
And then-
good. So, yep, that's good. I like that. That's a good way of putting it, right? So remember that proteins are the functional molecules of the cell, right? And so, yeah, each one of them has their own specific job. So I gave an example of an enzyme, right? So most enzymes are proteins. There are some examples of enzymes that are made up of RNA, but for the most part, enzymes are proteins. So what do enzymes do, guys?
They assist in chemical reactions.
Yeah, so they essentially speed up chemical reactions, right? And we'll talk more about those, right? Can you guys think of another type of protein or another job a protein might do in the cell?
Regulation.
Okay, good, regulation. What about somebody else? Think of something else?
Sorry, what was the question again?
Can you think of another job a protein might do in the cell or another function of a protein?
Transport.
Okay, good. Transport. So like there's lots of proteins that sit on the surface within the cell membrane, right? And they transport molecules across. Good. What's another one?
Doesn't protein like protect or like support?
Yep. I guess, I mean, more of, if you think about carbohydrates, you think about them as more of sort of support molecules, but yeah, that's definitely one of their functions for proteins. Correct. So things like keratin and there's structural proteins. All right, good. What's another one?
Storage.
Storage. What do you
They
mean
keep
by that?
healthy.
Say it again.
Proteins keep you healthy.
Okay. How?
Antibiotics within our bodies.
An immune system.
Yeah, not antibiotics, but what? Antibodies, right? Antibodies are those are made by your immune cells, right, to protect you. All right. All right, good. So we'll talk more about them, but I guess for proteins, we want to think more about kind of different functions of proteins, right? And so there are, hundreds of thousands of different proteins within the cell. All right, what about nucleic acids? What's our two main types of nucleic acids?
DNA and RNA.
DNA and RNA. All right, good. All right, good, guys. So I think you have a kind of a good start, right? And then basically we talk, more about each one of these specifically. So let me go through one thing that I think is probably pretty important here. Oh, the other thing is here, this is just kind of comparing, right? Inorganic molecules with organic molecules, right? So organic molecules, remember, always contain carbon and hydrogen. Okay, there's always covalent bonding. They're usually large, and these are associated with living organisms. So that's what we said. Why do we talk about them? Because obviously, biology is the study of life. We're going to talk about organic molecules. In chemistry, you can talk about inorganic molecules. We really won't focus on them at all in biology. Okay. All right. So. I'm going to kind of skip over this part. One thing to say here, again, this is something that you're going to get in more depth with in chemistry. Okay, nobody needs to, I say this in the recorded lecture, I'm sure, nobody needs to memorize these functional groups. You could save that for chemistry. Okay, that's not what it's about. It's just really understanding that the functional groups determine how those molecules are going to behave chemically, right? And so that will then sort of affect the function of the cell, okay? But nobody, again, needs to memorize any of these, okay? So these are just examples of functional groups, okay? And again, those are what are going to dictate how a molecule behaves, okay? What it forms bonds with and what happens, okay? All right. Okay, so the bulk of this chapter really focuses on those classes of biomolecules that we just introduced, right? So kind of just some general things, I guess I just want to make sure we all understand. Here, when we're just talking about them in general, right? I introduced sort of general reactions and things that are going to apply to all of those classes of biomolecules, okay? So some of which are listed here. So the term monomer, okay, is basically the subunit of one of the biomolecules, okay? And so it's if we think of a protein, right? What are the monomers that make up a protein? What are proteins made up of?
Amino acids.
Amino acids, thank you, okay? So think about, you know, protein or a polypeptide being the polymer, right? Poly many, and amino acids are the monomer, okay? They're the subunits that make it up, all right? And so we can talk about monomers and polymers for sort of each class of biomolecule. The one little caveat is that technically you wouldn't call a lipid a polymer because lipids contain two different types of subunits, okay? But it's the same idea, all right? So if you kind of look down here, this is what this is showing you, right? Carbohydrates, the subunit or the monomer is a monosaccharide, like glucose. The polymer is a polysaccharide, like glycogen, okay? For lipids, the subunits, again, we don't consider them polymers or because they have two different types of subunits. So lipids are made up of glycerol and fatty acids, right? An example of the polymer is a fat, okay? So glycerol and fatty acids make up fats, okay? There's other types of lipids as well that we'll talk about later on in the chapter. For proteins, we just said that, right? The subunit or the monomer is an amino acid. The polymer is a polypeptide. Okay, so again, I just wanted you to understand that this terminology really applies to all of these different types of biomolecules, okay? And we go through that. Now, the other thing I just wanted to make sure I sort of introduced to you guys is, in general, these types of reactions, right? So why do we call this a dehydration reaction? Where's that name come from? Why is it called dehydration?
You're taking the water out of the reaction.
Correct. Water's being removed. So if you guys take a look here, right? Here's our example of a dehydration reaction. So in general, when we're talking about synthesis of a biomolecule, right? Making that biomolecule, it's a dehydration reaction that's going to occur each time you join monomers together. Okay, you guys see that here? The reason why it's called dehydration is because of this water being removed. Okay, so do we know what we mean? What do we mean by synthesis, right? We're joining things together. Yeah, you guys see that? So if we want to use our example, our protein example, or really polypeptide example, right? And again, this is oversimplified, right? It's just showing you one. So we can think of this. This is one amino acid, okay? Here's another amino acid, yes? A dehydration reaction, again, this is kind of on the chemical level. This is what's gonna happen to join these two together. Water has to be removed, okay? And then a bond forms here, okay? Do we understand that? So this is saying now, what we're showing here is here are the two amino acids joined together. Well, if you if you look at this, here you can think of this as having 4 amino acids, right? A bond here, joining these two amino acids, a bond here, and a bond here. Each time this bond was formed and these amino acids were joined together, a dehydration reaction occurred, okay? Now remember, this is in general, right? So this is the same type of reaction that's going to occur when we're talking about carbohydrates, okay? And each time I go through each individual type of biomolecule, I'll remind you of these reactions again, okay? And then talk about it specifically for that biomolecule. All right, so questions right now. No questions? Okay, now if you look down here, okay, this is showing you a hydration reaction, and now we're talking about degradation. So what's another word for degradation, or what do we mean by degradation? Or when would you think, let's ask this way. If we think about breaking down, go ahead.
No, you like literally took the words out of my mouth. I was gonna say something breaking down, but it's okay.
Yeah, something breaking down. Okay, so now to elaborate on that, since I gave you the answer, when do you think of the body like breaking down things? What do you associate that with?
Digestion system?
Yeah.
Digestion system?
Yeah, good, digestion, right? If we kind of just think of like whole body, you know, we eat a piece of bread, right? It gets, you know, you chew it up in your mouth and then it goes down into your stomach. It gets broken down even more there, right? Eventually it makes its way into the small intestine. And at that point, it's really broken down into these biomolecules, right? Which then can, and again, I'm oversimplifying, but then these biomolecules that we're talking about here are actually the subunits of these biomolecules, right? Can then be absorbed into the blood, right? And so if you think about like and that breakdown is actually happening inside the cell, okay? So it's important, obviously, that the cell or the body can break down molecules, right? And go through these degradation reactions in order to, you know, eventually essentially use what is formed for energy, right? So if you think about like, you know, a complex carbohydrate being broken down, say, into glucose, right? What does the cell do with glucose? Why does the cell need glucose?
Isn't that for energy?
For energy, right? The cell, if we talk, and we spend a whole chapter on that, talking about cellular respiration, right? The cell's able to break down glucose in order to form energy. And what's the energy unit of the cell? What do we call the energy unit of the cell?
ATP.
ATP. Good. Okay. And again, we'll talk about that, you know, later on. All right. So for down here, again, we're degrading or degradation of a biomolecule or breakdown of a biomolecule. What are we doing? Now we're breaking this bond, right? And we're breaking it back up into those subunits. So if you want to use the same example as before, here's your polypeptide, right? These are a whole bunch of amino acids. Hydration reaction will break those bonds, okay? So now you have, you know, you're essentially breaking it down into individual amino acids. Why is it called hydration, guys?
Is it
You're taking the
bringing-
water out.
Because water is being
Oh, you're
taken
bringing
out
water
rather
in.
than taken
Bring
out.
the water back into it.
Yeah, now where's water going? Water's coming in, right? Because you broke this bond and now you have to add these, you know, this hydrogen and this hydroxide here, okay? So the dehydration refers to water being pulled out of this reaction, and then hydration, it's putting it into the reaction, okay? All right. Okay. Questions? All right. So and we kind of mentioned this already, right? In terms of enzymes, right? If we're talking about reactions in the cell, every single cellular reaction requires an enzyme, okay? So an enzyme itself is a protein, right? Its specific job is to speed up reactions, okay? We will talk a lot more about enzymes later on, okay? So this is, this was just kind of, this is just to make everyone realize that these reactions don't just occur on their own. They require the help of enzymes. Okay, like I said, we spend more time talking specifically about enzymes later on in the semester. Okay, so for right now, we're really focusing on the the formation of these biomolecules and really focusing on the biomolecules themselves, okay? But know that these reactions that I'm showing you here, sort of these general reactions, they're going to require an enzyme, okay? We're not gonna worry about that right now. We just wanna understand what we mean by a dehydration reaction and what we mean by a hydration reaction, okay? We wanna understand what we mean by synthesis and what we mean by degradation, right? So synthesis, we're forming the biomolecule, and then degradation, we're breaking it down. The cell is always gonna be breaking things down and always gonna be making things, right? Okay? All right, questions, guys? All right, then, you know, the chapter continues talking specifically about each one of these biomolecules, like I said. So again, what I just went through was sort of general information that applies to all of these different classes of biomolecules. Okay, is that clear? You will see, again, that those dehydration and those synthesis reactions, right, or the dehydration and hydrolysis reactions, sorry, will come back up again when we talk about each biomolecule again. So if you're feeling a little kind of like unsure about it, you'll be reminded of it each time I introduce another biomolecule, okay? So again, you know, each biomolecule, we're gonna talk about functions, right? What are the basic functions of carbohydrates? They act as an energy source. I just mentioned that, right? Glucose is the energy source of the cell. Also, they do provide a structural role, okay? So if you think about, I'll tell you what I mean by that, usually when you think about plant cells, okay, in terms of structure. So let me just so that you know what I'm talking about here. So in terms of the structure part, things like cellulose, okay, it's found in the cell walls of plants. That's what gives the plant cell its rigidity, okay? Also chitin, if you think about the exoskeleton of some animals, right? Also cell walls of fungi, they're made up of this structural carbohydrate called chitin, okay? So that's where that structural part is coming from. But, you know, I think a lot of times we think about carbohydrates as being energy sources, and that's true, but there are also structural types of carbohydrates as well. All right, guys, I don't want to keep kind of going with this because, again, you know, it's important for you to sit and listen to it, take notes. The other thing, you look here, well, let me just show you this, okay? So like I said, every time I introduce another biomolecule, you're going to see these reactions again, okay? So this is specifically now for maltose. So we're going to talk about forming maltose. So in this case right here, before we're done, I'll ask you guys, what are the subunits here? I mean, they're right there. What are the subunits that are going to be used to form maltose?
The OH.
OH and H.
I
The
can't see.
subunits is this, is glucose. What this is highlighting here is where the bond's going to form, okay? So the two subunits, you have two glucose molecules, okay? What's going to happen? They're going to join together here to form maltose. You guys see that? And so what this is showing you is this is when we say it's dehydration, we said water's being removed. Or this is where it's coming from, right? Water, H2O, 2 hydrogens, and an oxygen. And then you can see it's removed here. And then the bond forms between those two glucoses. Now again, there's a lot of other detail involved in the chemistry, but that's not for now, okay? For now, we just wanna understand if we talk about dehydration reaction or synthesis, we're joining two subunits together, okay? So maltose is considered, what do we consider maltose? What's a name for that, like a general name for it? So glucose is a monosaccharide. What about maltose?
Polysaccharide.
Yeah, almost. One step before that. What do you? How many?
Disaccharide?
Disaccharide, right? There's two. But then anytime you have more than two, yes, polysaccharide. All right. So just to kind of finish this, since we're here, right? So again, monosaccharide plus monosaccharide, you're showing the formation of a disaccharide. Okay. This is dehydration reaction. You can also call it a synthesis reaction. You're synthesizing or making something, right? All right, now, if you go the other way, right, this is our hydrolysis reaction, or what else? What's another name for this? What are we doing here? Are we synthesizing something, you think, or what are we going to do to this maltose? We go the other way. Break it down, right?
Inputting? Yep.
Yeah, degradation, remember we said, or breakdown. So now you're gonna basically break this bond and then you're gonna add that water back. That's why we call it hydrolysis. So we look here, what are we doing? We're breaking it back down into those 2 glucose subunits. Okay? So like I said, you'll see this every time I talk about one of those biomolecules. Okay, so like I said, now we start to really get into kind of, more in-depth information and concepts in chapter 3, all right? All right, guys, so I'm gonna leave it at this. If anyone has more questions, I'll stay on for a little while. Otherwise, make sure if you're in Tuesday lab, you're logging in at 2 p.m. Even those of you that have class at 2:30, please log, oh, you guys are all in Thursday lab, but we're logging in at 2 p.m. today, everyone, via the virtual lab link, okay? So I can introduce the next lab for you guys. All right, guys, if you don't have any other questions, you can log off and start listening to that chapter 3 lecture.
Great. Thank you.
Yep, thanks.
Bye-bye.
Have a good day.
Thank you,
Bye.
Dr.
See you in
Kaminsky.
lab.
Have a great
Bye,
day.
guys.
Have a good day.
Bye, guys.
Have a good day.
Professor Kaminsky,